From the Stone Age all the way to today, this island's location, its wealth, it's just been an irresistible prize for basically every major power that's popped up in the region. So you have to wonder, how did this incredibly long and dramatic story actually unfold?
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll journey through 6 main eras. We're going to start with the very first people to set foot on the island and take it all the way up to the very complex modern republic. Ready? Let's get started.
Okay, so our story kicks off more than 13,000 years ago. And you have to imagine, the island back then was a totally different place. It was home to some really unique animals and, of course, the very first humans to make their way there. So around 11,000 BC, the first hunter-gatherers show up, and wow, their impact was immediate. On one hand, they brought new animals with them, things like sheep and goats. But on the other hand, their arrival seems to line up perfectly with the extinction of the island's native pygmy hippos and elephants, gone forever. This period also saw these really sophisticated settlements pop up, like the roundhouses of Kirokitia. These were the literal first foundations of civilization in Cyprus. And this number, 9,500 years. This points to something just incredible that shows you how deep this history goes. Back in 2004, archaeologists found a grave, a 9,500-year-old grave. And inside? A cat, buried right next to its human owner. I mean, think about that. This is thousands of years before the ancient Egyptians were famously domesticating cats. It's one of the earliest signs of the bond between humans and cats anywhere in the world. Just amazing. All right, let's fast forward to the Bronze Age, because this is when Cyprus really steps onto the world stage. The island, which was called Alatia back then, was loaded with copper. And copper was basically the oil of its day. It was the essential metal. So you see the first cities like Enkomi pop up, and then systematic copper mining kicks into high gear, turning the island into a massive exporter. All this wealth, of course, attracted settlers. First came the Mycenaean Greeks, and later the Dorian Greeks, and they started adding this really distinct Greek layer to the island's culture. Well, you know what they say, with wealth comes attention. And as we move into the Iron Age, Cyprus's location and its copper riches basically put a giant target on its back for all the rising superpowers of the time. The first major empire to swoop in and take control, that would be the Assyrians. Around 709 BC, King Sargon II defeated the island's local kings, and to make sure everyone got the message, he put up this big stone marker, a stela, which was actually found later in Kition. It was a pretty clear statement. Cyprus now belongs to the mighty Assyrian Empire. But empires rise and fall. Assyrian power didn't last forever. Around 570 BC, the Egyptian pharaoh Amasis conquered the island, so it was under Egyptian control for a little while. But that was soon followed by a much, much longer period of Persian rule, which kicked off around 545 BC. For the next 200 years, Cyprus was just another province in the enormous Persian Empire. And then everything changed. Alexander the Great arrived. After he smashed the Persians in 333 BC, the Cypriot kings saw which way the wind was blowing and quickly switched sides. Just like that, the island was pulled into the Greek-speaking Hellenistic world. After Alexander died, his empire was split up and Cyprus fell into the control of the Ptolemies in Egypt. And it stayed that way until finally it became a Roman province in 58 BC. And that was a status it would hold for a very, very long time. So after the Roman Empire eventually split in two, Cyprus ended up as part of the eastern half, what we now call the Byzantine Empire. But its medieval history, oh man, it was defined by this really weird political setup and a super dramatic run-in with the Crusaders. This right here, this is one of the strangest periods in Cypriot history. It's called the Condominium. For 300 years, two mortal enemies, the Christian Byzantines and the Muslim Arab Caliphate, who were at war with each other everywhere else, somehow agreed to rule the island together. They literally split the taxes down the middle. So why would they do this? Well, it was just practical. For both of them, the island wasn't quite important enough to fight a massive war over, so sharing it was just a better option than risking losing it completely. So this really weird period ended in 965, when the Byzantines finally took full control back. But then, in 1191, history takes another one of those wild turns. Richard the Lionheart is on his way to the Third Crusade, and some of his ships, including the one carrying his sister and his fiancée, get shipwrecked off the coast of Cyprus. The local guy in charge, Isaac Comnenus, takes them hostage. Big mistake. Richard, in response, lands his army, conquers the whole island, and then sells it. This leads to a French-led Crusader kingdom being set up that would actually last for another 300 years, all because of a shipwreck. That Crusader kingdom, the Lusignan kingdom, eventually fell under the influence of some really powerful Italian merchants. And in 1489, the last queen, a woman named Catherine Cornaro, was basically forced to give up her throne and sell the island to the Republic of Venice. For Venice, Cyprus was an absolutely crucial military base and trading post against a new power that was rising in the east. And that new power? Yeah, that was the Ottoman Empire. By the 1500s, the Ottomans controlled pretty much the entire eastern Mediterranean, and that Venetian stronghold of Cyprus, it was next on their list. Sure enough, the Ottomans conquered Cyprus in 1571. And what's interesting is how they ran the place. Their administration of the island changed a lot. As you can see, sometimes it was a sub-province, then it was a personal fief of the Grand Vizier, then a full province, then back to being a fief again. This constant chopping and changing really tells you that the empire's priorities for the island were always shifting over the centuries. Okay, now we jump to 1878. The Ottoman Empire is getting weaker, especially after a rough war with Russia. So they make a deal and hand over the administration of Cyprus to another global power, Great Britain. And this move, this would set the stage for a whole new kind of political fight. So under British rule, a really powerful new idea starts to take hold, and it's called enosis. At its core, this was the political dream of unifying Cyprus with Greece. I mean, it made sense to a lot of Greek Cypriots. They shared a Hellenic identity, so after centuries of being ruled by foreigners, this seemed like the natural next step. And this one idea, enosis, would basically dominate Cypriot politics for the next 100 years. And you can see just how the push for that goal escalated over time. Britain made it pretty clear that unification was not on the table, and, well, frustration just boiled over. It started with riots in 1931, then it grew with an unofficial referendum in 1950 where a huge majority of Greek Cypriots voted for enosis. And finally, it all culminated in a full-blown armed guerrilla campaign by the nationalist group EOKA, whose goal was to force the British out. But here's the twist. The EOK campaign didn't actually lead to union with Greece. What it led to was a compromise, a brand new independent Republic of Cyprus, born in 1960. And it had a constitution that was very carefully designed to try and stop any one group from dominating the other. And this new government, it was a really complex power-sharing deal. The president would always be a Greek Cypriot, the vice president would always be a Turkish Cypriot, and crucially, they had full veto power. Parliament, government jobs, they were all split on a 70-30 basis. Now, on paper, it sounds like a workable partnership, but in reality, there was so much deep mistrust that the whole system was incredibly fragile right from the very beginning. And all those tensions finally just erupted in the summer of 1974. First, there was a military coup, backed by the ruling dictatorship in Greece, that overthrew the Cypriot government. Their goal? To finally achieve enosis. But just days later, Turkey invaded the northern part of the island. They said they were doing it to protect the Turkish Cypriot minority. The result was a ceasefire line that cut the island in two, a division that, tragically, is still there to this day. And that pretty much brings us to today. When you look back, the story of Cyprus is really one of incredible resilience, just constant pressure from the outside. But after thousands of years of being a prize for other empires, the ultimate question for its future now rests in the hands of its own people. So, if you enjoyed this history, you should definitely check out the other explainers in our Quick Country Histories playlist. And hey, for more deep dives into fascinating topics, make sure you subscribe to Notebook Summaries. Thanks for watching.